Hi, everybody, and welcome to Chapter 5, where we're going to talk about the juvenile court system. So the 1970s and 1980s, we saw a spike in juvenile crime rates, which sparked the perception that the juvenile justice system was being too lenient. The idea being that, look, if the juvenile justice system were more strict, more stringent, we wouldn't be seeing this increase in juvenile offending. So one of the ways that juveniles, the reaction to this spike in crime and the way to get this spike in offending under control was to get harder with juveniles and to make liberal use of juvenile waiver. Now I know we introduced it in earlier chapters, but we're really going to delve into waiver in this chapter. So like you already know, juvenile waiver is the transfer into the adult court, where the child is treated as an adult and they lose all protections of the juvenile court. So there's no anonymity. The media can take your picture, they can publish your name, they can, discuss anything about you and your alleged crimes in the media before the trial. And if you're convicted, certainly they can go to town with that after the trial. Your record is public. It will always be public because this is an adult crime, even though you may in fact be a legal child. Waiver happens, it's fairly rare. It's typically in less than 1% of cases, but when it happens, it's a super serious situation. Talk about changing the ballgame. It's night and day, in terms of consequences, right? So a lot of things will dictate waiver. Primarily, we've talked about in the past that it's the seriousness of the alleged crime, but it's also the child's age. However, I will say more and more you will hear anecdotes, individual stories, of younger and younger kids being waived into the adult court. So much so that it's kind of mind-boggling, like 11 years old. Think about where you were at 11 years old. My son's just a little bit older than 11 years old. I can't begin to comprehend it. So the seriousness and of the offense and the age of the offender, it's very serious when this happens. Why do we have it? First of all, like we've talked about, to sanction somebody for a murder or a violent rape, and they are only in custody until the age of 18, or in some states 21. It's just altogether inadequate for a level of crime that's serious. But it's also to remove somebody who is violent from the community, from the ability to offend. And remember, when a child is violent, their primary group of people that they're exposed to are other children, and we have to consider the safety of their peers. So we want to remove chronic serious offenders. We want to remove violent offenders, especially from access to a population of potential juvenile victims. Jurisdictional age limit we've talked about. There are multiple types of waiver. Okay, so the first is going to be judicial waiver. And this is where the judge is going to make the decision, the judge in the juvenile court is going to make the decision to waive the juvenile into adult court. There's also discretionary juvenile waiver. Okay, discretionary juvenile waiver is when a prosecutor is going to file a request to the court. The prosecutor is originating with them. They're saying, hey, I think this should be tried, this case should be tried in the adult court. It's too serious for what we offer here. So the prosecutor will file, and it will be, it will be ruled upon and determined. There's also discretionary juvenile waiver. Or sorry, I just said that. Sorry, statutory exclusion, legislative waiver. Let me say that again. There's statutory exclusion, legislative waiver. That's a mouthful. And that is waiver that is already determined, is predetermined in the legislation. That if somebody of a juvenile age commits this crime, they are automatically waived into the adult court. There is no suggestion of a prosecutor. There's no evaluation of a judge. If they're accused of that crime, boom, it's an immediate waiver. It's written into the legislation. This is typically reserved for violent crimes, really violent crimes. Then there's the, this is followed up by something called the once an adult, always an adult laws. So this is an interesting caveat and very unique. So once a juvenile is waived into the adult system, okay, and they're convicted of the crime, any subsequent offense, and I'll use an example here. Let's say it's an 11-year-old. An 11-year-old is waived into the adult system. based off of a legislative mandate, right? So they committed a violent crime, they're automatically waived, they get tried, they get convicted, and let's say they get 5 years. Okay, well, you do the math. 11 plus 5 is 16. By the time their sentence is up, they're going to be 16, maybe even younger if they get out, based on overcrowding or what have you. Good behavior, could be earlier, but they're still a juvenile. So any crime they commit after that release is now going to be handled as an adult. It's going to be handled in the adult court, because once an adult, always an adult. Once you've been waived into the adult court, that is where you stay. When this happens when you are waived into the adult court and you're tried there for one crime, that's where all subsequent crimes will be tried, regardless of what age you are. So if you are 16 and you've already been convicted in an adult court and you commit another crime, you're going back to the adult court automatically. Doesn't matter that you're still a minor. Okay? And that is the once an adult, always an adult law. It's very unique, by the way. There's always a waiver hearing. This is mandated due to case law, which we're going to go over in a separate lecture. But the prosecutor and the defense attorney both have to come to this waiver hearing, and they will present evidence. The prosecutor will present evidence saying this is why we shouldn't try it here, why it should be tried in the adult court. And the defense attorney will come and say, hey, these are all the reasons this needs to stay in juvenile court and that it should never go to adult court. And then the judge makes a ruling about which way the waiver goes. Does it go to the adult court or is it dismissed? There's juvenile exclusive. So this is where a juvenile is processed in a juvenile court. And if they are adjudicated delinquent, they can receive a sentence in the adult court. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. These are sentences. I apologize. These are possible sentences. And again, this gets back to that step towards more punitive control of the state over juvenile offenders, right? This is a step away from, excuse me, this is a step away from the more rehabilitative approach. So let's start with, there's blended sentences, and that is when a judge has the discretion and the leeway on the punishment, okay? They can utilize a sanction from the adult or the juvenile system, both. Okay, so they can use some sanctions in the adult system and some sanction in the juvenile system. That's what we call a blended sentence. Again, this is a step towards more punitive reactions to juvenile delinquency. There's also juvenile exclusive sentences, which is processed in a juvenile court. If the juvenile is adjudicated guilty, they can receive a sentence in the juvenile system or the adult system, but not both. It's up to the judge to make a decision. Okay, they can go to juvenile detention or they can go to adult prison, but they can't do both. Okay, that's juvenile exclusive. There's juvenile inclusive sentences. These are also processed in a juvenile court. If they are adjudicated guilty, the judge can impose both adult and juvenile sanctions. So stay with me here. The juvenile sanction is served. Okay, so the judge is going to say, I'm making this up, but 5 years in a secure facility of juvenile detention, 5 years in adult prison. Excuse me, adult prison. The juvenile is going to go to juvenile detention. Okay. If they go there and there are no infractions and there are no problems, the juvenile will do the 5-year secure facility at a detainment center for juveniles, and everything else is done. They never have to do the adult sentence. However, if while they are in the juvenile facility and they keep violating rules and there are, excessive issues, behavioral issues, violence, problems, that is going to be over. Your detention in the juvenile facility is done and the juvenile will be remanded into the adult sentence. So we call that juvenile inclusive. Finally, or not finally, there's juvenile contiguous. And juvenile contiguous is processed in a juvenile court, but the judge has the freedom to impose a sanction beyond the age of the majority. This gives judges a lot of leeway, and this has always been the either or, right? That, if a juvenile kills somebody, well, some judges aren't comfortable waiving them into the adult system because they're juveniles, right? But certainly, if you're a 15-year-old and you killed somebody, 3 years in a juvenile detention facility seems inadequate, right? But maybe adult prison is overkill, right? This is the happy medium. This is both worlds where the juvenile judge can say, Okay, yeah, I've got you till you're 18, and then you're going to go do some more in the adult prison because just limiting you to the juvenile court is not enough of a sanction. Okay, so you're here till you're 18, and then you're going to be transferred into the adult court, or excuse me, into the adult prison for another 5 years after 18. There's also criminal exclusive. This is a case that's processed into the adult court. So it's managed into the adult court. And upon conviction, the judge can determine whether to impose a juvenile sanction or an adult sanction. Okay. So let me say that again because that's a lot. It's processed in adult court. If you are convicted, the judge has the leeway to say, do I want to give you a sanction in juvenile corrections or adult corrections? It's up to the judge. The juvenile will serve in detention until they reach the age of majority, and then they will be transferred to an adult prison to finish the term. And finally, there's criminal inclusive. Criminal inclusive is a case that's going to be processed in the adult court, and upon conviction, the judge will impose a sanction in both the juvenile justice system and the adult system. However, the sentence for the adult system is suspended. And what that means is a suspended sentence is the judge verbally gives it to you, but you don't actually have to serve it. Okay? They're suspending the sentence. You will go and serve your time in a juvenile detention center. However, if you engage in violations or infractions or subsequent criminal acts while in that juvenile detention center, the suspended sentence will be lifted. And then you will have to serve your adult sentence as well. So those are all of the options. And I know there's a lot of options there, and they're very similar. So you're going to want to study these pretty well for the test because it's easy to get them confused.